Again, welcome to Focus on Liberia. This is our Saturday show, the Focus on Liberia Marketplace. Welcome to the show. Invite a friend and let's talk business, economics, and finance. Gentlemen, welcome to Focus on Liberia. We're going to be discussing about electricity today. That is for Liberia. We say the business of electricity and the challenge for Liberia. My guest, who is also a member here at Focus on Liberia, Mr. William Thomas Bernard King. William, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be on the show, and thanks to all our guests for joining us today. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. And joining us for maybe third or fourth time,
Yes.
we have Mr. Jimmy Eastman. Jimmy, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Hey, thank you, Ja. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope we have a very enlightening and educational experience.
Great. Our topic today is the business of electricity, that's energy, and the challenge for Liberia. I know we all know about LAC. We all know that nowadays we hear words like current, current. So it's about current, electricity, energy. But before we get into our topic for today, we want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. This is Saturday, 3 o'clock. Every Saturday, we talk business, economics, and finance. We talk about money. Even the Bible agrees that money is the answer for everything. So we take time out of all that we do to discuss money. Before we begin our topic today, we want to have our water cooler moment. Everywhere, this coronavirus epidemic is on our lip. People are panicking. We have had a couple of shows here, but we want to start with that. Just to see where we are, like an update, especially from the economic and business standpoint. Our hearts go out to people that are suffering as a result of the virus and people that are in scary or panic mode. Our hearts go out with them, especially a country like Liberia that was battered before and devastated by the deadly Ebola. So anything about coronavirus is so scary. Or as our people say, the one who was bitten by a snake, even when you see your worm, you're afraid. Guys, let's talk coronavirus and its impact on the economy, the global economy that is, and what really we're seeing today. Let's begin that as our water cooler moment. Let me start with Mr. Eastman.
All right. As we can see that the coronavirus has turned into a pandemic. That is, it's affected people across the globe. We've seen that because it's a deadly disease, if not handled properly. We see that the vulnerable, the elder people, and people with compromised immune systems are more susceptible to death and to this disease than people of stronger immunity. And because of that, we have discovered that it's very communicable. And to curtail its spread, it's required that we social distance. In other words, we don't come in contact with each other that much so that the disease won't spread itself. But to do that means that people will not have to get around and move around. And for economic activity to take place before we begin to appreciate the multiplier and the accelerator effect of money, people have to exchange goods and services. But when nobody is moving around, nobody is buying as much as before, this caused stagnation. So throughout the world, we've seen a plunge in economic activity, a big drop. That's evidence in the stock market. If you notice, stocks are going, almost all indices indicate a drop in activity. except few stocks like Amazon, because people will still be ordering things. Walmart seems to be still good, but the overall all stocks indices are down. So that not only does that affect investors' perception, but people who are in the service industries who had to come in contact with them. Now these people are required to stay home. Some of them are being laid off. When these people get laid off, how can they feed their families? We've seen this happen in more in the most affected areas, like Italy today is most affected. We saw it in China. It's spreading to Europe and the USA. Fortunately for us, we have not seen such a devastating effect in Africa yet, but we can already tell from what's happening across the world. If we're going to curtail the disease, we'll not be able to move around. And if we don't move around, I mean, people will not go to work. Can you imagine somebody is living from day to day and then now they can't go and look for food? They can't go to work and look for money to buy food? It will have a devastating effect. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. Um, we're also concerned about the facilities required to treat and curtail this contagion. We challenge back in Africa, and we already seen in the modern and in an advanced world that this is already straining their resources. There's shortages of masks, shortages of test kits, shortages of supplies to clean. We've seen all kinds of shortages. And this is where there's abundance of much more money available. What will that mean for us in Africa, where we have limited resources and that these shortages already exist? So we have to brace ourselves, and we have to now prevent it from spreading, because the cure will be it's better to prevent it than try to curtail it later on. So we have to brace ourselves and do everything necessary now before it really hits us.
Right now, William, some offices like mine, we're working from home. Kids are home or doing their schooling from home. I was at the Mall of Georgia. It's completely closed, and places are closing, and the life is going off and on, off and on.
Okay, look, ladies, back up. Talk, William. Let's hear you.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Definitely in these times, yeah, I mean it's an adjustment, it's a change, especially for us in our Liberian community here. We're supposed to be celebrating the life of one of our dearest members who passed, and you can imagine how close this guy is here. We were expecting and planning for maybe 300 plus people. And can you imagine now we are adjusting to basically having 10 people at a time go into the church, right? And social distancing and so forth. So it's just very tough, but we're managing in the U.S. And Dennis, to your point, in Liberia, which is important, is that not having access to refrigerator and freezers and so forth, obligates us to go to the market every day for our food. So definitely, it's something that we need to be very cautious about. And a lot of us are definitely looking at this thing. And in America, yes, we know we like you mentioned, isolation and everything. Our kid is home, so trying to spend time. I pull out the old video game, playing with my son, different things like that. But in Liberia, this thing can spread quickly. So and I think we're doing a good job. We're doing our best. We've learned some lessons from Ebola. Yes, there are criticism, but we can look at those criticism as maybe from a place of fear, or just look at it for what it is and see how we can just do better in this time. But I am, support our government and see the work that they're trying to do. It's not easy, so many variables, but our hearts and encouragement goes out to our folks back home.
Mhm. And like in Liberia here, we can afford to turn on the air condition and stay inside.
Yeah.
In Liberia, you got you can't
gotta
stay
get that
inside.
cold breeze.
You got
The
to come
cold
out
breeze.
to taste the cold breeze.
Yeah.
And so it's tough. But so we keep very hopeful and follow the instructions that we've been given, about the social distancing, washing your hands, and make sure, people around you, when they are sneezing, keep away. And let's learn the best we can. A lot of videos going around, a lot of falsehood, a lot of people claiming that they saw this years ago, that God is trying to do something. Whatever your faith is, I think right now we are where we are. So what we need to do is to see how we can prevent it. Whether it's God who sent it or is the devil who sent it, we should prevent it. We should do our best to take advice from medical professionals. And if you have other suggestions, like some say drink Jolobo, or steam yourself, you put hot water in the bucket and cover yourself with blanket. Whatever the home remedy may be, as long as it is not harmful, but we want you to follow the advice of your doctor or your herbalist or whoever you're taking advice from. But we should do our best to prevent it and to halt the spread.
Yes.
That being said, that brings us to our focus for today, which is the business of electricity and the challenge for Liberia. Before we begin that, William, why don't you give our disclaimer?
Oh, thank you, Dennis. For our disclaimer, I got so involved in this thing, I didn't even bring up our our disclaimer. Hold on. I got it right now. Thank you. I was involved in what you were saying with this whole coronavirus.
In the meantime, Dennis, I noticed that I'm not. I don't know if y'all can see me on there.
Yes, we can.
You can. Okay. Perfect. All right.
So for those of us joining us, the content is for informational purpose only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Nothing contained on our media or written documents constitute a solicitation, recommendation, endorsement, or offer by Focus on Liberia or any third-party service provider to buy or sell any securities or other financial instruments in this or any other jurisdiction in which such media material may be shared. All contents on this site is information of a general nature and does not adjust the circumstances of any particular individual entity. Nothing in the media constitutes professional or financial advice, nor does any information on the platform constitute a comprehensive or complete statement of the matters discussed or the laws relating thereto. FOL is not a fiduciary by virtue of any person's use or access to the media content. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. So let's go to electricity and the business of electricity and the challenge for Liberia. And I have two guys who've been involved in this thing about electricity. So let me start with you, Jimmy, to tell us your background or what connection you have with electricity, so that our viewers can have a sense of what we're going to talk about today and what you bring to the table.
Okay. Up until the war in 1990, I worked with the Liberia Electricity Corporation. I worked with the transmission and distribution department as one of those in charge of operations. In fact, I was on duty when the plant, the Bushrod plant, was attacked and taken over by the INPFL of Prince Johnson. I will not go into gory details of that day. That was July 19, 1990. But before then, so we were in charge of switching. We determine which circuit's going to be fed at peak periods where we experiencing a surge. We have to sometimes do power shedding, so we were controlling that. We control all the emergency crews. That is, whenever there are issues and problems, we will send the crews out. We determine where they go. We also control the maintenance, transmission crews, and maintenance and construction crews. So we were the operating arm of the LEC. And my experience, even those days, that during the rainy season we've depended on hydropower, and we had turbines that could produce up to about maybe about 60 megawatt hours during the rainy season. But our peak was a little higher than that. So even during the rainy season, we had to bring on thermal units to supplement the demand for power at that time. And what we also used to do during the rainy season, we would supply companies with power, so that during the dry season, when we can't use all our turbines, they would supply us back. So it was kind of like quid pro quo. We supply you today, and tomorrow you supply us back. So that would help us during the dry season to meet the demand for electricity. But even those days, we had challenges with the cost. We did a calculation a long time ago. It's been several years, but I think it was about 30 some more cents per kilowatt hour. And the affordability, even those days, for the typical Liberian it was high. How we were able to be operational is that our industrial customers, they were foot most of the bill. About 2/3 or more of the bill came from industrial customers. The private homes, individuals, power theft was an issue, but really their consumption was very low. So what we looked at was how we can capitalize on the industrial power needs, and that's what we try to focus on to keep operational. So we had our challenges then, and we did have at the time there are three components. I'm not sure. I'm jumping ahead, but
yeah. So let's hold off on that. And let me, okay. When you said you were having challenges during the dry season, why was that? Because the hydro was dry?
Yes. So during the rainy season, we have high water levels. The hydro is a dam. You build a dam so that when the water goes over the dam, it drops, and that force, you can use that. It's mechanical energy. That force of water coming down, you can use that force of water to generate mechanical energy, and that mechanical energy that waterfall was used to turn the turbines, large turbines. Turbines are like, they have these blades that when the water comes down, it turns the blades, which in turn turns the magnetic field, generates electricity in a magnetic field, and that eventually will produce electricity. Okay. So we had 4 of those. So it was there was enough water to drive all 4 of those turbines. But during the dry season, the water level is very low. We can only use one. A lot of times, only one of those turbines can be turned on. That's how low it was. So during the dry season, we need to depend on thermal production. That is using generators that consume fuel oil or gas turbines that can confuse another type of grade of fuel, and it drove the cost up. And like I said, cost was an issue already. So when you have to use thermal generation, that created more of a problem for us.
All right. Let me go to William, and I know William, and we'll even talk about your paper a little bit. But tell me yes. Your involvement with electricity.
Thank you, Dennis. My involvement with electricity started in 2004. when I was a student at the University of Southern California doing my studies. During the summer, I got a chance to intern for Southern California Edison, which is one of the biggest provider of electricity west of the Mississippi, and generating about $20 billion a year in electricity income. And at that time was one of the most progressive purchaser and pursuer of renewable energy. It had a coal generation facility, it had nuclear facility, it had hydro facility, it had a fuel generating facility, and it also had peaker units. So I interned in the regulatory and affairs division for one summer, 2004. Then the following year, in supply chain for one summer, and then of course by very graciously, very thankful, I was afforded the opportunity to be given an offer from college. And that began my journey in the electricity industry, working in supply chain, but also being exposed to electricity, the electricity business in California, which is one of the most highly regulated states. And I did that for about 13 years. And over the 13 years, I got exposed to the various components of electricity, going from transmission and distribution, which is what Jimmy Eastman touched on. Then you have the regulatory and affairs division, which is the government side. Then you have customer service, which is the relationship between the customer and the meter and the payments and so forth. And lastly, the generation side, which is basically all of these different ways which ones can generate electricity. So being exposed and being in a company like that gave me a chance to really look and get a good idea of the economics behind electricity. And it surprised me of how few people really know about this, the economics behind electricity, and how utility companies really make money. If you ask anybody how the utility company make money, they say, hey, it's because I pay my bill. When I get a bill for electricity, I pay. That's how the electricity company makes money, which is so wrong. That is not how they make money, and which we'll be talking about a little bit later on, really, as we get into the economics and how a electricity company really makes money. And lastly, we'll talk about the fact that electricity companies are oligopolies, meaning they are a mixture of monopoly and the free market system, and also they are enabled by the government. And majority, or for the most part, that's really the stamp of the electricity companies worldwide. With there's some freedom in it, but we'll get into it. So thank you, Dennis. I bring about 13 years, 14 years, and also I went to Liberia in 2012 for about 3 months. And during the 3 months, I had a chance to really just explore and get a little bit intimately involved. Also knowing some of the folks from LEC, and in addition to that, doing a deep dive, looking at all the available documents. And I also wrote a paper to just share with Liberians about electricity and what it really is, so that when we have conversations around electricity, giving them the foundation to speak and to have a more informed thought around it. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia. We are discussing the business of electricity and the challenge for Liberia. My guest, Mr. William Thomas Bernard King, who brings 13 years of experience in the industry, and Mr. Jimmy Eastman, who has experience working for LEC in Liberia. So, plus his own professional experience here in the US. So let's start with the business component of electricity, or electricity delivery into our home. And I want William, you introduce that, and then Jimmy will pick it up from you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So really, when you look at the business of electricity and how stuff works, so we're going to talk about, and I'll keep it high level. There are four components. Most people, they have the idea, hey, I have this generation facility, and that's the only place where I need to spend money. And generation electricity solves all the problems. Well, that is not true. Basically, look at the generation side as if you are growing cucumbers, or you're growing carrots, or you're growing pepper. Now, you can grow the pepper, the cucumbers, and everything, but at some point in time, when you produce it, you have to bring it to the marketplace. And that's when electricity has to come to our house. So when you're driving and you look along the street, you see all these poles and the wires and so forth. Well, that's another added cost. So you have the generation cost, then you now have the transmission and the distribution cost. Depending on the level of sophistication and efficiency that you want, those lines, those poles and everything, they cost money. Now, from there, you go into the customer now, where you have the meter that is put on your house to make sure that you have that meter going on. Now, that's another added cost. And lastly, you have the regulatory and regulation side, which is a little bit of a cost as well. So as you begin to add these different components, like what we say, it's the finished material. So you're adding different costs along the line. And before you know it, when it comes to your house, it's 30 cents, 35 cents, because all these different touch points, these business entities, there's a cost for people to work, to go around and so forth. So the business of electricity really needs to be looked at in those four major components. And those four major components, everything that it touches, there's an added cost. Now, where the rubber hits the road in Liberia, we may look at it and just say, okay, who's going to pay for the generation? So there's a cost. Then who's going to pay for the transmission? Well, there's a cost. Who's going to pay to connect and to get those meters? There's a cost. And how do we regulate this? Well, there's an additional cost. And hence, when everything is said and done, you're looking at why it's between 30 to 35 cents right now for electricity. And lastly, something that's very critical is, are people paying? Is there a market? So if I bring my pepper to the place, are people paying? Now, the thing about electricity is right now, we have not come up with a sophisticated way, or a cost-efficient, we have not come up with a cost-effective and efficient way to store electricity. And so what that means is that you cannot store electricity. So as it's being generated and coming through the line, it has to be used or you lose it. And so that's the business, and that's why right now in Liberia, because of how it is actually funded, reason why we are between 30 to 35 cents per kilowatt.
And Jimmy, let me come to you. It may seem, a question like that, but why do we need electricity? What's the importance? People. Yeah, people will look at it. Oh, okay. I mean, light. Everybody needs light, but walk us through the importance and of electricity.
Okay, very good. Electricity is categorized as an energy. Okay, it's an energy. Energy does work. So what makes electricity important? Well, it can do things. It can give you light. It can make computers work. It can make you, it powers almost any electrical device that we use. Typical, we take it for granted. But it is essential for an advanced economy, an advanced society, that you have electricity available. It enhances education. It enhances development. In fact, one of the key factors of development is the availability of electricity. You will find that the more developed a country is, the more available electricity. If you find in sub-Saharan Africa, where not everybody has electricity, you will find that those areas are underdeveloped. So there's a correlation between the availability of electricity and the development of a community, society, or country. So that's how important it is. It is direct. It's even more important. It's even more of a factor than roads. You would think
I was
roads.
coming to that. I was coming to that. Go ahead.
Yes, roads are essential. Again, it's kind of like your arteries. It kind of essential for the transmission of goods and services to move things around. But what we've seen, yes, so roads is right up there. But what we see a bigger correlation with development between electricity and development as much as roads. Roads will be next. But the thing about it is electricity usually follows a pattern where there's roads, because you have to build it, like Mr. King was saying, you have to build a network, you have to build a grid. So it is very coincidental where there are roads. Along these roads is where we will string out the network. So that's why they kind of hand in hand with roads, you know. But yeah, so electricity is closely related to development. So that's how important it is. Now, we talked about business. There are three or four questions you ask when you're doing a business. First of all, what? What are you going to produce? Second is how you're going to produce it. And the third is for whom? Who you're producing it for? What is your market? The market, and Mr. King just touched on it. The market is very important, because if you have nobody to buy it, you have produced it. What you left with no capital and coming in.
Yeah.
So it's very important to have a market for anything you produce. So in electricity, there just was what Mr. King was saying. There's 3 or 4 basic components. You have the generation, as you can see here. Some companies here only concentrate on generation. Then you have the other component, which is transmission. How you get it from the generating plant to somewhere nearby a city. And after it gets to the city, now you have to distribute it. You have to put it along the streets. You have to put it in the different neighborhoods, and that's the distribution. Okay, again, that can be looked at as a separate sector altogether. And then finally, you have the consumer who will connect to the grid. Electricity, because of the cost, the capital cost to put up to facilitate the supply of electricity, it tends to lend itself to what we call a monopoly. In other words, if you try to do it by yourself, you will not make money. It costs too much. So the best way to address the needs of electricity is to have one company. It tends to have only one company need to do it, 1 or 2, because several companies can't do it. But what they've done in the industry is they have one company producing it, or 1 or 2 producing it, another company responsible for transmission, then another one for distribution. But because of the cost to provide this service, to provide this energy, it tends to lend itself to a monopoly or oligopoly, as Mr. King was saying. It's just too expensive to do, and everybody can't do it. It will not be profitable. Okay, so that is why you don't see many companies involved in it. There were talks in Liberia, if you're not too long back, where they said, why don't we invite other companies to supply electricity? Well, how is this going to happen? You look around Monrovia, you see the grid, the network. We call it the grid. All the poles with you see light, power on it, and transformers on the poles. We call all that the grid. The grid is owned by whom? Is it a share? Can you have several grids? Can you have several different poles, lines running through the city? Can you have, if you said you're different companies, every company will have their own pole lines? It's impractical. They've tried that before, long time ago. They did it in this country when it came to telecommunications. It's not practical. So you have to find a way to share the grid. One company can own the grid and one can. So you could have several participants in the distribution of power, but they have to find a way to share the grid. Now, what they do in advanced countries, you have some hydro generation, some people who produce electricity with hydro. You have some solar generation, some people producing power through solar, and all of them feed the grid from different areas, from different directions, and they share the grid. Okay, now that can be done, but if you look at it, there has to be a lot of cooperation. There has to be synchronized. There has to be a lot of intercooperation for this to happen. So there's the business aspect, okay, and there's the technical aspect and the practicality of producing electricity.
Thank you. We're just being joined by our West African correspondent, Edward Amara, who has been studying in college, so he has not had the chance to come. Mr. Amara, welcome, and you are joining us from Kenema City, Sierra Leone.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. Electricity when I'm seated here in the blackout. Welcome. I'm just listening. Thank you. And I really admire the brief analysis. I think you just symbolize exactly what we are going. It's a fantastic analysis, and
Yes,
I really admire it.
thank you, thank you. Hey, Edward. Hello. Hey, Dennis.
Yeah, Williams.
Yes,
follow.
Yeah, long time. We're still here. So Dennis, let's get into some of this the tight spots. Okay, let's get into the tight spot.
We're going to get there. I just want to give Amara 5 minutes to. I know it's tough there with coronavirus and everything else, and we have not heard from the motherland. So we want to give Amara 5 minutes to just give us a roundup.
Yes.
Of first starting with the coronavirus and then the African news roundup, and then we can take leave of him. As we are talking about electricity, there it tells us that he has electricity, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a practical example I'm saying there. It's very empirical. You know, even Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, we are suffering from the same virus apart from the coronavirus. And the virus that is affecting us is the one that is against electricity. Unfortunately, we hardly had power here. They're trying to get the power source from Ivory Coast that may likely supply Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, but that project is yet going on. And normally we have lack of power here. That is why sometimes even living in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, you found it very difficult because we do not have good road network. There is no light, water facility, and most of these things we have found within the resources that can actually give us this. Unfortunately, there is nothing there to manifest it. We just pray and hope that we have a government who can work successfully to supporting these things. Having said that, you know, the coronavirus, I think, is a center of each and every news headline in the world for now. Since it has been declared by WHO as a pandemic, it is now all over. And these are actually hit Sierra Leone. Though the present have not been felt here, but most of its fear have been manifested into the people. Because mind you, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea just suffer from a kind of setback during the time that we had the Ebola crisis here. When you watch at it, although Sierra Leone is yet free, but we are engulfed by Guinea and very close to Liberia, and Liberia recorded that in 2 cases. Guinea have another 2 cases, though one have been recovered. Unfortunately, we have some gisters here because they are fear. When you watch at Sierra Leone is actually interwoven with Guinea. Most of what we do here, we normally get into Guinea because the 10-year civil war that ravaged the economy of Sierra Leone and Liberia, it has actually concentrated these people to do most of their transaction in terms of trading into Guinea. And if Guinea is not a safe country, I wonder how how Sierra Leone is going to be safe. Then coming into Africa, you watch at Africa in the north places like except Libya and the Western Sahara that are actually free into the north. With the exception of that, the rest of the countries have actually recorded some cases. Most like in Egypt is actually 126 cases now, and about 3 deaths into that particular area. Everybody is just worried. Now, Libya and Western Sahara, they are the only safe country there, but Libya is also suffering from. We'll have a kind of General Alpha in Benghazi. Then we'll have the Tripoli-led government that's actually supported by the United Nations. It is based in Tripoli, that is the capital city of Libya. So what they have decided is to actually place a curfew hour by 6 o'clock night, that is PM, to 6 o'clock AM, and that is both in the rebel control zone and the government control zone, so that this virus is not escalating to it. Then when you come into the southern part of Africa, most of these areas have actually been infected. And when you watch at the weather into the southern part of Africa or into the South African countries, most of those weather conditions are like Europe. They are very friendly. And when you see the European weathers compared to those Southern African weathers, it is almost similar. And based, though it has not been proven scientifically, but based on some projection, people are saying that the virus is very friendly with mild weather, and these areas are actually engulfing to searching. So the virus is actually hitting them there. South Africa has even declared a kind of national state emergency based on health, and they are ensuring that they remote control the movement of people to ensure that this virus does not actually continue to escalate. Because initially it happened into the Oran Free State, they thought that we are a joke, but unfortunately they have taken over. Then people like a charismatic leader like Cyril Ramaphosa have come over to take over everything. And unfortunately, closer away here in Burkina Faso suffered recorded another death today, and the deputy speaker of parliament, that is Rose Compare, died yesterday, and today they recorded another person. Then, based on the latest news that I collected this evening, 4 of the officers in the Burkina government are actually infected, and these are top officers: the Minister of Information, the Minister of Education, the Interior Minister, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and even the Minister of Mine and Marine Resources. All of them are carrying the virus. So the situation is just becoming worrisome, and Sierra Leone is just engulfed within this particular country. We are deeply worried, but never mind, this government has gone ahead to put some strategies in place to ensure that they remote control the movement of people and ensure that whosoever that is in here should stay here. No other, from today now, the 21st, the government have banned all international planes coming into this country. Then finally, to end in Guinea, we all amidst this type of virus constraint that we are going, which have been declared national crisis or international crisis, because it is all around the country. Alpha Conde, who is around 86 years old, still insisted to amend the constitution and run for another 2 terms in office. And because now his time is going to be expired in March, in March this year, it has expired. Should he succeed in winning the referendum, it means he's also going to be given another 2 terms of office that he will actually run in a concurrent time by 6 years, meaning he has to take another 12 years into office plus 86 years. The man will be nearly 98, and that will be an escalating figure. The opposition leaders are saying that they are not going to accept the referendum to be conducted, so that defer the coronavirus route. They are on the street demonstrating, and the president insisting that tomorrow at all costs the referendum is going to be on there. Even this evening, I post a kind of article on India. I was heavily attacked by some of these mandikas who claim that I accused them of whatsoever thing, but that is how social media goes. So that is the main worry, and I am afraid, but pretty soon, should that quarrel continue into Guinea, you may see that most of these Guineans are going to be leaving from Guinea to come into Liberia or Sierra Leone, and Guinea is already infected with this virus. So that is a tendency, and I'm afraid any time from now, Sierra Leone may also, I'm not saying they will, but Sierra Leone may also record the case.
Wow, that's our West African correspondent, Edward Amara, a brilliant guy who is doing a roundup just like he's eating cake. Thank you, Mr. Amara, and we miss you, and we'll be listening right there in Sierra Leone. Stay safe, keep the news coming.
Edward, make sure you pass those exams, my man.
No, definitely. This exam has kept me away, but I'm going to pass, and trust me, I will send you the result. I believe in myself. I believe in myself and the Lord Almighty. I'm going to pass them.
Thank you.
Never mind, I'm back, but I'm happy to meet you guys, and I hope to join you next time again.
Thank you, Edward.
We're happy to see you again.
Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia as a FOL Marketplace. We just heard from our West African correspondent, Mr. Edward Amara, joining us from Freetown, Sierra Leone, giving us the news roundup, especially on the coronavirus. And something terrible is going on with Guinea. If that guy, if there happens to be some hostilities in Guinea with the spread of this coronavirus. It's not going to be good news for the Mountain River country. So back
Yes.
to our topic. Now, we spoke briefly about that, and William, you were bringing on another line. So let you move on into that direction.
Yeah, thank you. So the main thing, one of the things that wanna address is that why is it that for our President Sirleaf, why is it that she had 12 years, and why is it that we didn't bring electricity on a little bit quicker? And also, many people dispute, but they say, why is it that Mount Coffee, which produced at its peak rainy season 84 megawatts, why is it that it cost over $300 million to get back up? And one of the things is that, looking at Liberia, yes, there were some cost overruns, and it's important for us to understand that Liberia is competing against other major companies globally, or other major companies globally, for expertise and for professional talent. So getting the amount of talent over there to do the work to get the Mount Coffee up, you have to present a competitive pay, a competitive salary. Number two, the Liberian government only was responsible for a very small portion of the cost to build the Mount Coffee. So if you're not putting up the money for that plant, you are very limited in how you can dictate and manage some of those costs. And the other thing is that we have to understand, when we're going for aid, money, there's a lot of stipulation that is put in place for aid money before you can get that aid money. So in the first or second or third year, you may hear an announcement that goes out to say that, okay, the European Union or USAID has decided to contribute or give 60 or 100 million towards electricity in Liberia. And most people believe that that check may be coming next week. Well, there's a long lead time. It may take a year, it may take 2 years, it may take 3 years. And you're not necessarily going to get that money, and you're not going to be the one that's going to dictate how that money is actually spent. So we have a problem in Liberia where we want certain things, we want this electricity and so forth, but we as a population, we are challenged in really being able to put our skin in the game to really move some of these things forward. So when you add all those things up, you run into a lot of delays, a lot of hindrances, and so forth. And hence you're going to get the Mount Coffee, which was very popular. It produces a lot of electricity. Ironically, it produces a lot of this electricity during rainy season. So you're producing this power in rainy season, about 80 megawatts. And you run into a situation where you can't do a whole lot of work during the rainy season, but you have all of this power. And for our viewers who are listening, to globally, if you want to produce 1 megawatt or to build a plant that produces 1 megawatt, the estimated cost, depending who you go to, is anywhere between $600 to $1 million per megawatt.
And William, we'll get into those details. Let's look at the current situation of electricity in Liberia. I don't know if how close
Yes.
to actually giving us a picture. And for both of you, let's discuss that current state so that we see where we are and give our viewers, a bird's eye view into what it is and what can be done.
Okay, you coming to me or to Jimmy? I just want to give a high level of where we are. Okay, Dennis?
Yeah, and then Jimmy will pick it up from there.
Okay, so we have in Liberia about 5 or 6 generating facilities. You have the heavy fuel oil facility, which is around Bushra Island. You have the Mount Coffee, which gives you rainy season 76, during the dry season maybe 10. You have a couple of other, you have some very small hydros around one, I think the Firestone, and there's a couple of other ones. So total, the estimated amount of electricity that we generate as a nation may be between 32 to 40 megawatts. Okay, 32 to 40 megawatts. And right now with our T&D system, transmission and distribution lines, all of it connected, we may be able to connect people to use about 15 megawatts. Okay, so between 15 to 20. So you're producing about 40 and you're only able to sell 15 to 20. Okay, so that's just to give you an idea. Now that's dry season time maybe. And then during the rainy season, of course, you are producing close to 80 to 85 megawatts, but you're still only able to distribute between 15 to 20 megawatts. So that's where we are right now, number one. Number two, a lot of our major industries in Liberia, they're not connected to the grid, so they provide their own power. So where we could have income coming from these folks, we do not at the moment. So that's a situation. So you may say, well, who are you talking about? Well, ArcelorMittal, that's one company. Simon Darby, that's another. The Coca-Cola bottling company, that's another. Some of the major hotels and so forth, they're not connected to the grid. So those are some of the major consumers that we could use, and a couple of major agriculture companies. They're not connected to the grid. So LEC is not getting this income from corporations that will be able to pay you on a monthly or on a 2-month basis consistently. They're not getting that.
Jimmy?
Wow, yes. A lot. What Mr. King was alluding to is we do have some generation in the country right now, but a lot of the power we are generating, we have yet to deliver it to the consumers. So part of the planning is how can we get power to connect these large consumers, because there's no need of having generation if you cannot connect the large consumers. And the only way to connect these consumers is to build the grid, build transmission lines, build distribution lines, provide transformers so you can deliver it. So part of the planning, yes, you need a hydro, but without delivering the electricity, you're back to square one. It had to be part of the plan. And people like Coca-Cola, those are ideal targets. Any manufacturing plant are the best, our best customers. So that is what we have to address. Why we have to get the lines built to provide this power. Now,
so
you
Jimmy
asked,
and William, you're saying these companies are not connected?
many of them are not.
And what, because we don't have the means to connect them? Why is that?
Well, let me give you one example quickly. ArcelorMittal, they're in Nimba, correct, Dennis? I believe they're in Nimba.
And Bassa too, I think.
Bassa, sorry. So imagine you have to run the line. So you have to run the line all the way from the current locations we have all the way up to Bassa so they can connect to the grid. And when you're looking at a transmission and distribution line, to run one line, you're looking at between $300 to $1 million, depending for 1 mile. And it's because you have to look at the land rights. You have to make sure you're not just running lines in different areas. You have to look at the equipment, and you have to look at the human resource that you're going to use to put that line down. So it has to be laid mile by mile at a time, and that's a very high cost, and it takes a while.
Okay, and the only thing, John, the only thing I can imagine is that they looked at this whole electricity project or reestablishing electricity distribution in Liberia in twofold or threefold. First, they looked, so well, let's build a plant, and they got some financing to build a plant. You alluded to something. Is that the best cost? They said $300 million. Well, it is very capital intensive to build a dam and to build have those turbines installed. It is a very capital intensive project. So whatever, $300 million, it sounds big, but if you're getting your money back, that's not so big. What should have been included with this plan is your projected sales, your projected income generation from the distribution of electricity. That should have been part of the plan. So I only imagine that they did it in first phase. So that phase is gone now. The second phase now is to build out the transmission and distribution connections. That must be part of the second phase. I'm not part of the conversation, but I was there in Monrovia briefly, and there were some. I did hear conversation of plans to rebuild the whole grid. Now, who is footing that bill? How is it being done? If I were suggesting it, I would allow a distributor and to go ahead and do it, so that they will invest it and they will reap the benefit from it by connecting customers. Okay, so they give a small portion back to the government for the generation of it, and they go ahead. I would privatize it, tell you the truth, and not several, and that's how you can get it funded. But if you're going to come out of pocket and build your transmission and distribution network, you may shortfall. And also, capital people who do business, they have more incentive to work more efficiently. So by allowing other companies, if you privatize that portion of it, allowing them to do that portion of it, not only will you get it financed, but you also will have more efficiency comparatively than you would. Okay, so that may be in the making. Now, for the typical consumer in Monrovia, power is intermittent. Right in Monrovia, there's several places that need power. Several places the grid has not been extended. They're doing it gradually. You can see where they're doing it, but it's been creeping. It takes time. And again, those places that they're trying to get for individual consumers, there's low return. So yes, you want them to build the line out there, but when are they going to reap their investment? So you have to target. It has to be an effort to target major consumers, factories, and that way you're going to get your most of your investment from, and then that will allow you to provide electricity to other consumers as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so it has to be working hand in hand with companies that will require it. Embassies are another good consumer. Anywhere we can get large consumption, that's how it has to happen. In the meantime, we'll have intermittent power, intermittent services, because of the generation issues during the dry season. There's not enough to go around, and because the grid is not completely built out. It is frustrating, but the best way to do it, from all I can gather, is to target major consumers, bill out to them, and they will cover the costs of your investment.
So this sounds like very capital intensive. A lot
of
money. So
it's second to roads. It's second to roads. Roads are the most capital intensive investment engineering projects. Power is second to roads.
So where we're going to get the money from, and if investors want to invest, what are they looking for, and how can we attract them?
Can I chime in, or Eastman, you go first? You want to go?
Okay, I can go for. I will go briefly.
Yeah.
We have to promise them that they will the revenue generation that they will be they will collect revenue from their investment. In other words, you build it and you collect the revenue. Just give a small portion for generation. That will be the incentive. But now they will say, okay, I build it, I will collect the revenue. Who I'm collecting it from? Where the factories? Where the industries? What do you have there? The way let me give you one typical example. When Kwame Nkrumah wanted to build the Akosombo Dam in Ghana, they didn't want to give him the money. First of all, they said, why do you need such a large dam? It's a huge dam they have there in comparison with Liberia. See, you don't need it. He said, what do you mean? I said, no, you don't need it. What he did was he landed a deal with a bauxite mining company that promised they were going to consume millions of megawatts per year. Once he established the future revenue from power consumption, they gave him the money to put the dam in. So you have to establish future revenue if you want investors like that to come in your country. Go ahead, William.
Thank you, Dennis. So a couple of things that I want to bring up that is going to be a little bit challenging, but it's something that is workable. So you are electricity transmission and distribution lines. They are a matter of national security. They're a matter of national security. So when you get into this, you get into the regulatory policy affairs and you get into policies, government policies. And at this moment, I think one of the challenges that for the Liberian government is, do I give this thing that I consider a matter of national security, do I give it to a private entity and they have control over? So that's a very scary thought to really do. The other thing that we talked about was that Jimmy touched on that I think from an investor, as an investor, I'm going to look at right now in Liberia, I think it's between 900 to maybe 1.5 million. That's the receivables for electricity. And if someone can correct me on that, please do. So when you're looking at that, immediately a private investor that's looking at this, they're going to have a bit of reservation in terms of how they collect it. And also the scary thing about private investor is now I have to deal with governments and I have to deal with them on something that it's a little bit risky, and that they have more power and they can just say, no, once I build this and I really leave. Something else that we should consider is that the NGOs and private organizations right now, they've done about maybe $700 million in electricity investment in Liberia. You have the Mount Coffee, 300 something million, but then you also have some transmission and distribution lines and different things that they have done. So you're looking about between 500 to 700 million that they've put into Liberia. Now, you have to understand that all of these monies, they're not grants. And so what ends up happening is if you are a private entity coming in and saying that, hey, I am going to come in and I'm going to begin collecting or grabbing revenues and so forth from certain entities that they have a plan to maybe connect in the future, you have to understand that the Pied Piper is going to have serious problems with that because they've already put in some substantial investment. The picture for Liberia from outside investors is not looking very enticing. I'm not saying it's not impossible, it's not enticing. However, one space that I believe we haven't addressed is the Liberian investor, is the Liberian diaspora investor. The reason why I say that is because you have, there's the passion. You have the passion, you have the willingness for them to see certain things done and to improve in Liberia. And so I think that there's that space that hasn't been explored. significantly and sufficiently enough, whether it's through some form of bond or through some form of a funding or so forth, where it's something that's presented to the diaspora that people may maybe buy and so forth. Now remember, yes, it's very capital intensive and so forth, but the people who have a longevity and who have the ability to stand something, maybe like a 20-year bond or something at a low interest rate, maybe it's 3%, 4%. Yes, they may say, look, I can go somewhere else, maybe get it better. Maybe I can get a better interest rate. But my man, this is my country and I love it. And I want to see us succeed. And I want to be part of building my country so we can kind of tap into that. But, the outside investor is going to be challenging. I give you one example when I did my research, and it's in my paper. In Nigeria, they privatized the generation, but the next space that they privatized was T&D. And when they privatized T&D, most folks thought that it was a very lucrative business that they could get.
Transmission and distribution.
Yes, transmission and distribution. They privatized it. And when those investors, Nigerian investors, when they got in there, they realized that, hey, the maintenance and the upkeep of these grids is very expensive, and our people are not paying the necessary tariffs. Tariffs basically is the price of electricity that is actually set. And so they ran into a huge quagmire of a problem that now they are looking to correct. But it was very interesting dynamic. Even in the U.S. looked at privatizing a lot of various components. And right now, they are only able to privatize the generation piece. They're only able to really privatize the generation piece because they realize that those components are expensive. And don't think in America they don't do that. They don't pay for this stuff cash. They pay for this stuff over 40 years, 50 years. Some of these financing for electricity because of the enormous cost. And that is how they're able to keep the tariff, the price of electricity in Liberia, 30, 35 cents. That's how they're able to keep it in a place like California between 12 to 14 cents, 15 cents per kilowatt. Because in other areas of the U.S. a little bit cheaper because they do long. Yeah.
Give me a sense of that 12 kilowatt, thing.
Okay, so let me say that the average consumer in the U.S. during the day in the house, they may consume maybe in the whole day, maybe 5 to 6 kilowatts per day, maybe 7 kilowatts. So I'm being charged 14 cents. So 14 cents, and I'm doing maybe 5, maybe 7 kilowatts. I have my TV on, I have my microwave, my refrigerator, all these little things that I have on, okay? And, maybe I make 40 grand, maybe I make 50 grand a year. So after about 2 months, I get my electricity bill after 2 months, and it's like maybe 100, maybe $75, maybe 150. But I'm making $50,000 a year, $40,000 a year income, right? Right. So you look at the Liberian person, and oh, by the way, let me take a step back. The majority of the money for consumption of electricity, which is interesting, but in the U.S. really comes from mom and pop homes because of the population and different things like that. There's more things plugged in, but industry plays a very key role. So in Liberia, you have the person who's making $200, maybe $400, maybe some people making $800. Now the price of electricity is 35 cents. So at the end, your light bill after 2 months is about $400, or it's about $400. So you can imagine that it's a huge challenge. And also, if you want to open up a manufacturing plant, now manufacturing plants, even if you're melting steel or you're melting iron, you said there's a lot of scrap cars around here. We can do something. We do rubber. We can open up a rubber factory. We can produce, I don't know, condoms. We can produce Tupperware. We can produce all these things, right? And when you go in there to sit down to produce these things, the second largest item on your expense sheet is electricity. It's just sitting there, and so you're not competitive.
All right. All right. Let me read some comments before I bring in one caller that is online now.
Okay.
Jimmy, I think when you were talking about those companies, Musu Wanglo Stewart is asking, are you referring to pre-selling the projects to major power consumption companies?
Okay, that's a good question. I'm talking what you're doing said they will provide the infrastructure, the investment for the infrastructure, and you have an agreement that the revenue from that they will get, they will pay you back for the generation, but they will collect the revenue directly from the consumers. That way, you're not taking your money to build the infrastructure, and they have incentive to do it. Now, a couple of things you asked before you go to the next question. The average, let me give it like in the U.S., the average consumption of electricity is about 1,100 kilowatt hours per month. It varies from state to state. Where it's colder, they will use a little more, maybe 1,002. In Virginia, we use 1,001. So if you look at that, if you times that by 15 cents, okay, let's do the math in our heads. If it was $1, it'd be 1,002. If it was 50 cents, it'd be 600. It would be 25 cents, it would be 300. So 15 cents, which is almost half of that. So it's about 100 some more dollars a month. In Liberia, it's the cost of electricity is way higher than that. You understand? So our electricity bills are high. What you want consumers to buy electricity, at the same time, your cost to produce it is high. So that's the dilemma we face. How do we reduce costs? Electricity is something that it lends itself to economies of scale. So one small company doing it and for a small area will not get anything back. They will not get their investment back. You have to do it for larger areas. There's several complexities on how we will have to do this, but definitely privatization. I know we do it in Virginia. We have private companies in the distribution part of it. We have Dominion, we have Virginia Power. There are private companies. That is the way to go, because you for government taking this on, it is strenuous and they lose. It is better to provide opportunity for private investment, but then you also have to provide the atmosphere where industrial companies and whatnot will want to take to establish themselves, so that the power companies can get some revenue from them. So this is working hand in hand.
I wonder how is this being done in other countries like Ivory Coast that's supposed to be us.
Yeah. Dennis, let me let's I see a couple of comments that we'll be able to talk about that, but I think I interrupted Jimmy. I'm so sorry. I think he's on mute. I apologize.
Oh, so I've been on mute. Oh,
for like maybe 10 seconds. If you can go back for about 10 seconds.
Okay, so the privatization enables the government not to have to come out of pocket with building the infrastructure. It also guarantees more efficient privatization. Also, because companies are built for profit, they will not. They will tend to, if they're not making money, they will do things to be more efficient. Where government, we have seen that government has soft. They're not as efficient. So two things to do is to get out of having to finance these things yourself. And second, you don't do it as efficiently as a private enterprise would. But because of the nature of electricity, it lends itself to economies of scale. In other words, if these companies were to do it, they can't do it in a small amount. They have to have enough area to cover so that they will be able to recoup their investment. Okay,
Yeah, that's why I
so
was asking, how is Ivory Coast or Nigeria?
Yeah. Let me.
How are they doing it?
go ahead, William.
Okay, so you're talking about Dennis. What you're speaking to? You're speaking about a power purchase agreement. Okay.
Right, not just that. I mean,
So Ivory Coast. Let me tell you how Ivory Coast does it. I'm on mute.
we're hearing you. Go ahead.
Okay, Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast, by the way, has one of the best distribution in West Africa, with over 60% distribution lines and everything. Ivory Coast has a huge population, so they're able to pay for some of these. Ivory Coast, the way to do the electricity, because the government have a lot more money, they put money into the building and the development of this industry. And also they get money from France. They get money from France, and also they use private investors. So the combination of private investors, government money, and they have a great network. So those combined allows them to provide electricity at an affordable rate, way below that of Liberia, to their citizens. So that's how they're getting away with it. But the main thing to understand is that they also issue bonds. They also issue securities in Ivory Coast to help with some of these investments. And lastly, Ivory Coast provides power to 4 other countries in the area. They provide power to Liberia. They provide power to, I believe, Ghana. They provide power to, I think, which other country that's connected to them? I think Togo. I may be mistaken. So they have this network. They sell and they buy also, and they have some of the same challenges. During the rainy season, they have electricity. During the dry season, they're challenged with supplying electricity to even places like Liberia at times, because they supply to Nimba area.
I like to add you one thing is we have basically two types of consumers. We have individual consumers, private homes, and then we have industrial consumers. Again, my experience is that the bulk, if not 3/4 of our revenue, does not come from private individuals. It comes from these industrial consumers. That's when we were back before in LEC, this is what we talked about. So it is not just the individual consumers you need to target. You have to have businesses that require power, and you have to be able to distribute the power to them. Okay, and that is the incentive that you will have to provide to private companies for them to want to come in and do this. Now, Ivory Coast has a lot of those business industrial things. They have a lot of companies that require. They have a lot of huge buildings and whatnot that require power. All right, and so the development of our industries is key. And Liberia is we are, the majority of our people. We have the youth under 30. Majority of people. The last time I checked, we have a lot of potential there to develop the human capacity to produce, to be very, very productive. So once we get our people trained and producing, industries will definitely piggyback on that. But all these things have to work hand in hand. You have to develop the people while we're developing these industries. That's what they look at. Any investor, anybody, they look at your skill, your labor pool. What kind of labor do you have there? Do you have skilled laborers? And that is what has to be included in all the planning for the progress of the country. It has to be a wholesome plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dennis, can you go to some of the questions from
let
the
me bring up
comments?
the caller.
Yeah.
Joe Moyo, you are live. Where are you calling from? Your question, man.
Yes, sir. Calling from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm currently, like all you guys, self-quarantined.
All right.
But great topic, fellas. Great topic. But my question is, this is the 21st century, and we're still talking about 20th century technology in terms of transmitting electricity. Most countries, not only developed but developing countries nowadays, are moving into cheaper, environmentally friendly source of energy, such as solar, wind power, etc. And I didn't hear any of the panelists, like Mr. King or Mr. Eastman, or you, Mr. John, touch on those alternative sources, especially for a country like Liberia that was kind of like made for solar and made for wind power in terms of, sunshine, the weather conditions. So maybe there's a disadvantage.
Let the panelists address that.
So
that's a topic I know very little about. So if you guys could tell me what the advantages are, I would really appreciate it. But I didn't see you guys touch on it. Maybe you're going to touch on it later. But
we're coming to it. But
let's call too early.
No, you're good. Let's touch on that. Alternative sources.
Yeah, Dennis, you got to keep me to 1 minute for my response to him, okay? When it's done, you say time, okay?
No, just keep it to 1 minute.
Yeah, keep it to 1 minute. Okay. Liberia, for solar, Liberia has a humid kind of weather. So solar is there, but it's not the very best, but you can do it. A country like California, where it's dry, is a little bit arid, but there's a lot of sunlight. Solar is definitely good for that area. With all of these technologies that are out there for generating electricity, where it comes down to at the end of the day is that kilowatt. How much does it cost to produce 1 kilowatt? 1 kilowatt. And right now, nothing has been able to beat hydro. But all of these other technologies that you have out there, including solar, at the end of the day, the cost for 1 kilowatt at the end of the day, it's cost prohibitive for the kind of efficiency that you're looking for. But that doesn't mean it cannot be used with something else. We can use a mixture of that.
And just to piggyback on that, yes, the caller is right, and it's a beautiful question. What Mr. Dennis is saying, Mr. King is saying, Dennis, yeah, we can use solar. Okay, what does it to provide this home with 1,200 kilowatt hours? How much will it cost for a solar energy to do it? They said, well, for us to provide it, they will be paying 50 cents per kilowatt hour. The consumer said, what? 50%, 50 cents. Right now I'm paying 15 cents. So you see, these are alternative ways of generating electricity are good, but there are some costs involved that prohibit them. The other thing that is involved is the grid. They tried this project in Nigeria. Nigeria was a good example where they tried this project. The grid was disparate. You see, all these sources are supposed to feed into the grid, but if the grid is not built, you have to synchronize power. You can't just have, for instance, if you have a solar plant feeding electricity to the grid and a diesel plant feeding electricity, all that energy, all that has to be coordinated and synchronized. It's they have to work together, okay? And there has to be some load balancing. So there's a lot of technical things you have to do to make them work together, okay? And the grid has to support that, okay? The grid has to be as such that, okay, we can put a solar plant in Harbel, and we can use the plant in Bushro. All of them will feed the same grid. But there has to be some technical things you have to do for them to work together like that. And that is where they experience some hardships. In the developed world, like here, they've figured ways to make these things cooperate and work together. Okay, so there's the technical aspect, and then there's the cost prohibitive aspect of some of these alternative energies. It's not that we can't use them, but it has been a cost issue. They require a lot of investment up front. And then when you, at the end of the day, per kilowatt hour, and this is what you have to look at. Always look at the money when you invest in technology. Okay, this technology we're using, how much it will cost the consumer? Well, it will cost the consumer 50 cents. But the consumer is paying 15 cents today. Do you want to go to that? Well, if that's your only alternative, yes. So you have to balance the two. You have to balance the cost against the need for the technology.
Let me come to some comments. Mazzola Gisi said, we have heard about the privatization of LEC for many years. I don't know the reason why the implementation have not been achieved. That's from Mazzola Z. And then Ja Gon say, people with houses and financially equipped cannot get LEC in their homes because they did not bribe someone at LEC. Hence, privatizing the institution to a credible institution will be great.
All of them. Jargon mentioned something else, Dennis. He said, "Can you, if you scroll up,
can you let me read through, or there's
yes?
You want
No. Sorry, I just got excited about this. Sorry, brother.
Go ahead, read his comment and respond to it.
No, I was just saying that he said the process to get electricity in Liberia is to write a letter of request to LEC. I write like the same letter 5 times and could not get any updates from LEC. So I was supposed to give a dude who worked there 150, and my process was done in 3 days. Musu said, William, your comparison is great, but far-fetched. You should compare the Liberian case with that of other countries in the region, West Africa, and not the U.S. So, Dennis, I want to address that quickly, okay? 30 seconds. In Nigeria, for example, the price of electricity per kilowatt ranges from 2 cents to 19 cents. So you imagine who's paying 2 cents? Well, it's the guy who has his little market, the small little box carton market, who needs just one light bulb. So he pays about 2 cents. And then you go all the way up to the industrial folks and to the big homes, and they pay about 19 cents. So in Nigeria, that's what they have over there right now. The issue they ran into was people that pay electricity, they would tell them just don't pay the full bill of what you're consuming, just pay a set amount. And what they ran into was when the grid needed to do some work, some technology investment and infrastructure investments, they ran into the issue where they didn't have enough money. So that's a little bit of a comparison with Nigeria right now at the moment with what's going on. They have a lot of big numbers. They attempt to do a lot of big things with electricity, but however, right now they're having a little challenge with who's going to put up the money to fund these. Another thing somebody mentioned that I want to go to is they said, Musu said, structural transparency, security, stability. We advance in these countries. We have to accept that we need to get things right in order to do that. And I think Jagon also mentioned the same thing about how do we trust investors. Well, a couple of things that I think we can really do. Number one is where we should really look at our Liberians to be the investor, because an investor that's not Liberian, he will look at this thing without any kind of passion or anything like that. And the idea here, yes, is to have this thing ran from the private sector. You make a stronger argument when your private sector investor, majority of the private sector investors who are in this investment, if they're Liberians, because now the government looks at that and the idea of a security threat is a little bit more subdued and is a little bit mitigated, because they understand that the people who are investing in this, they are Liberians.
Yeah, and to piggyback on the reason you may the audience may wonder why is the cost of electricity in Nigeria only 19 cents and in Liberia it's 35 cents. Okay, let me explain it like this. If you were to put a generator in your home, maybe a one kilowatt or maybe a 50 kilowatt generator, you have to buy the fuel for that generator to run. First, you have to buy the generator, maybe that $2,000 or so. Then you have to put fuel in it. Maybe you have to buy about 5 gallons a day just to keep that generator on. 5 gallons a day turns into, in the cost of gasoline in Liberia, but let's say $4. So that's about $20 a day to run your generator. But if you all put together like 4 or 5 people in the area, and they have a bigger generator, and everybody put money, you will find that it will cost you not $20 each a day, but you'll only be paying $5 each a day. So, like the generation of electricity lends itself to economies of scale. The more people involving in, the more people you are delivering electricity to, the cheaper and cheaper it becomes. But so that is why it's so essential that we have industries that need electricity established, so you can it will become cheaper for the consumer. But as long as our businesses are not picking up and industries are not picking up, electricity will remain to be expensive.
Yeah.
You see?
Dennis, I'm just smiling at this. Let's talk about the West African Power Pool, and I think there's something here that is phenomenal that is taking place. And if you're a Liberian listening to this, it's very important. I want you to really hear this well. Look at the West African Power Pool is basically a connection of a grid, and you're connecting. So for example, in Liberia, where we have an advantage, where we have a big advantage, is that we can look at this and just say, hey, I'm not focused on providing electricity to my Liberian consumer as I am focused on generating some kind of income or revenue from the business of electricity. So if that's the case, and I know that I am close to Ivory Coast, and Ivory Coast has one of the best network, I can build a generating facility in Liberia through whatever technology that makes sense, and I can sell it at a wholesale price to Ivory Coast because they have a much more developed and sophisticated system. They will be willing to buy that power at the wholesale price, and now they are acting as the distributor, and they can distribute to other countries. Now, what you can do with that is that you are now helping to generate some kind of revenue that would then help for you to do other things in Liberia, but they are more consistent. If we do not do that, what happens is that as the West African Power Pool grid gets developed, other countries in our area, West Africa area, they will begin to build, whether through private entities or not, begin to build private generating facilities and just continue to sell the power into the distribution grid. You see, so we have to look at this and see, okay, where the opportunity lies that we can kind of step in a little bit more. Ivory Coast is a very respected country in terms of paying for that electricity. So we shouldn't get caught up in the fact that Ivory Coast is providing electricity to NIMBA. We shouldn't get caught up in that, because to run the transmission line is cost prohibitive right now for us Liberians. But how we can make some money is that we can provide them the power wholesale. We can make some profit off the wholesale, and then they can make their profit off the transmission and distribution and off the retail, which is fine also. It's called taking advantage of the Mono River Accord and also the West African power pool structure that is currently made available to us. And something else to consider is that we, as private citizens of Liberia, if we create a bond or a fund or whatever in collaboration with the government, we set our own terms. It's a private, so we don't have to be constrained by some of these other terms. We can set our own terms with our government and so forth. Yes, our government is not perfect, which is very true, but at the end of the day, that's what we have.
Thank you, William. One last thing I want us to close with, but before that, there was a question here from Dave Jar, who was asking the pros and cons of government getting involved in all this.
The pros and cons of government. Well, there has to be some regulation about this, okay? Even if you're going to have investors or privatization, there still needs some regulation. You can't let them do anything weather together. There's still some standards you want them to meet. There are still some agreements that you want to put in place that each person will have to be committed to and to honor. Okay, we are a small country. Liberia is small, and it's a lot of things we're trying to do by ourselves. It's impractical. If you see the countries, large countries, they don't try to like each state doing its own thing. Sometimes it's better that another state supply you this and you supply something else. This is what William is going to. It is sometimes better for Ivory Coast to give parts of Grand Jita, parts of Nima, maybe parts of Maryland. Okay, it's better for them because why? They can give it to them, and the people will only be paying maybe 20 cents a kilowatt hour. But if we were to build the network to finally reach them, we'll be charging. Besides, there's money needed for other things. There's something new known as comparative advantage. We need money for other different things. So the money we're taking to go build it to them, and then later charge them almost 50 cents per kilowatt. Doesn't make sense. Let them pay 20 cents per kilowatt from Ivory Coast. In the meantime, we can be working on developing other things, or we can look at producing a lot of. We have hydro. Hydro is the cheapest generation. So okay, instead of we try to build all these distribution lines to all the way to, why don't we just, like William was saying, why don't we just give this power from ground coffee to Guinea, give it to Sierra Leone, and let them build that. That way, they will benefit from our generation, and our people, they can get power from other places. It is a plan that comes together, but it needs cooperation. We're too small as a nation to expect to do this all alone and be profitable. We're too small. So we have to cooperate. And that is one of the things that's hindering our development, because we don't cooperate enough to take advantage of economies of scale and to leverage our strengths and weaknesses. We all try to do it all by ourselves, and you're too small. So everything's gonna be expensive. Whereas if you're huge and you are cooperating, everything will be less expensive.
All right. Well,
Dennis,
gentlemen, thank you so much. We're going to be wrapping up in the next 5 minutes.
Yes.
So I just want you to touch on anything that I know the topic is huge. So
Yes.
we're not going to cover it all, but let's touch on just a few more things in the next 5 minutes so we can close.
Okay. Dennis, you're talking. Did you want us to touch on something
No,
from the
just
caller, which I want to?
we have 5 minutes to close, so you can do
Thank
anything.
you. Thank you. Hey, keep me to 2 minutes, please. Okay, please. So, of course, I want to address this, and we are no novice in terms of sending money to Liberia and investing in Liberia. We have all invested some money in Liberia, and we have yet to see the return on our investment in Liberia. Some of us, we've been lucky or fortunate, maybe we have seen small investment return and so forth. But what I do want to say is that I want you to think about that hard, long, hard, and strong, because as much as we criticize and we are afraid or we are apprehensive of investing or sending money to Liberia, something that remains constant is that at the end of every month or 2 months, we send money back home. Whether we agree with things or not, we send money back home. So what I'm saying is that we have to keep trying, looking at different ways and different approach to how we can get this thing right, where we know that it's a worthy investment to make in certain things like electricity is not impossible, but it's something that's going to take a collaboration between the public and the private sector, and it has to start with Liberians. That's my thought. Thank you.
Okay, and I know I saw a comment about it said until Liberians can shift their mindset and get serious about real development, we're going nowhere, by Musu Stewart. There has to be a change in our mindset, and that change has to be that we can't afford to continue on only thinking about today, to only think about ourselves and only thinking about right now. We have to we have to think about our future, the future of all of us, and how we will by doing things in a different way, we all will benefit. We all claim that we all make claim that things could be better, things could be different. We all criticize, but those people who doing this thing are not they're not from different places. Is us. So before we start looking outside, have we taken a reflection within? Am I different than those people I see? And if we are, then what is the example we're setting that will encourage and motivate our fellow Liberians? How is my life, how is my contribution helping to change that mindset that we want to change? And if we're not doing that, a great man once said, if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. If we're not living our lives that would help contribute to that mindset change, then no one else is going to do it for us except ourselves. So we have a citizen responsibility to change that mindset, to turn things around. Each one of us. I don't care how frustrating it may be, but we still have that responsibility. And pointing fingers doesn't do it. It's us. So to change it, let's change ourselves and let's reflect that in our day-to-day and see how it may impact everybody, our fellow Liberians.
Wow. Gentlemen,
Yes.
thank you so much. We've come to the end of our broadcast. We want to thank our viewers.